I worked with Alistair on 5 general election programs, 5 results programs, on 5 Apollo moon landing programs, and on several US presidential election programs. But perhaps the most memorable event was the launch of News at 10 on the night of July the 3rd, 1967, for what the ITV companies called a 13-week trial. Their contracts were coming up, and that concentrated the mind somewhat. It was quite an experiment, a half-hour news program on ITV in prime time. That it won through with good audiences was hugely due to Alistair's authoritative newscasting, his tight writing, and a unique gift for what I've always liked to think of as popular scholarship. Alistair had a well-stored mind, rich in literary and historical allusions. He always spoke warmly of Worcester College, Oxford, and of his tutor, the great historian Asa Briggs. After Oxford, Alistair joined the Glasgow Herald, and from there he won a Harkness Fellowship to spend a year in the United States. It was an influential year that led to his lifetime interest in American affairs. When ITN was fronting an open-ended program, say on budget day or a by-election or a space shot, if we had a communications problem in the control room, our program director, Diana Edwards-Jones, would say into Alistair's earpiece, "Phil for 2 minutes while we sort ourselves out," or words to that effect. And out would come a pearl of an English essay, illuminating the issues we were covering, which would hold us in thrall in the control room. Perhaps it could be best described as, again, as what I've always thought Alistair was good at, popular scholarship. One of my earliest recollections was one night in the early 1960s, long before News at 10, when our late news was just a bit more than 14 minutes. Alistair was political correspondent. There was a big political story, and we called him in to do a piece. We had about 5 minutes to go to the end of program. I met him at the lift on the 7th floor of Television House in Kingsway. He held out a sheet of paper, and he said he had written a piece, and those of us who knew him, he had this tiny but neat handwriting. And as the door of the lift closed, there was a waft of air, and the script swept out of his hand and went down in the lift. But he went on the air and did a flawless piece to camera. I remember going to the United States with Alistair to a US presidential election, and we had links in those days with the ABC News Network. We had lunch with the election team, and I recall ABC's chief newscaster saying to his network president, "You know, Alistair should be anchoring our election program. He knows much more about American politics than I do." One of our greatest exploits was the coverage of the first moon landing, Apollo 11, July 1967. David Frost's programs were then popular in America during the week, and on ITV in Britain at the weekend. And the actual lunar touchdown was scheduled just after 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. ITN proposed to the network that ITV should stay on the air all night while the astronauts were on the moon, and when something was happening on the surface of the moon, ITN should be on the air, but when the astronauts were resting in the spacecraft, David Frost's popular London weekend program would do moon-related interviews and entertainment. Alistair and I flew to America and stayed a weekend with the Frost team in their beach house on Long Island. And I well remember, as we arrived, it was late at night, and there was only one bedroom available, and only one bed, a large one, which Alistair and I shared. Years later, Alistair used to say, "I'm the only newscaster who's ever slept with the editor." David Frost and Alistair linked together well, and on the night of the moon landing, bounced off each other splendidly, and gave ITV one of its first major ratings victories during a major news event. He embodied the best qualities of a broadcast journalist, and we salute today the passing of a great broadcaster, a great editor of The Economist, and a great personal friend of my wife Juliet and mine. And finally, Alistair used to enjoy giving the midweek soccer results at the end of News at 10, particularly if you could get a line in about Partick Thistle. Thank you.